What's going on, everybody? I am BirdDog John. Thanks for joining us today, and we are going to kick things off here. It is 1 a.m. in Melbourne right now, and that is exactly where I am. Without any further ado, I'd like to welcome Robbie to the show. What's going on, man? All right, let's see. Hey, what's going on, Judson?
Hey, thanks for having me.
Right, dude, much more. We are joined with BirdDog Ian, who is at the Capture Summit over in Atlanta. So how's it going, man?
Hot and sweaty.
That's the most important question that our team can ask. Why are you needing this camera?
Now, I haven't tested this thing since it got here. This is something that I'm really excited that NDI did. That's cool. Obviously, there are lots of flavors here, but this is the 4250 line. And our little friend here. Say hello to my little friend. It's brewing in the back of my throat. Based on the recommendation of Senseless, we're going to give a Java Monster a try.
Oh, yeah, Pocky,
We
dude.
got a little Pocky, and
Yes.
I have been putting this off for an age.
Oh, I'm so excited for you.
There is a Snacks on Stream mystery box brought to you by my Snacks on Stream manager, Brayton. What's going on, Bugsy? There you go. What's going on? Balu, good to see you, man. What's going on, NetHab? Hey, what's going on, Judson? And hey, Kevin, good to see you, man. What's going on, Jeremy? How are you? Thanks for jumping on. Oh, it's all good. Yeesh, welcome back, everybody. Hopefully you're doing well. I am BirdDog John here for another round. Got my setup as I want it. I need to double check and make sure that the audio is coming through. It's good and loud, that's for sure. Let's see if I can just adjust that slightly. Because, okay, so on Thursday, you might remember that I had mentioned something along the lines that I was wanting. All right, I'm just going to bring that down just a shade, and hopefully that makes this a little more tolerable. Hang on one second. Yeah, okay. Let me know how that sounds. So on Thursday, you might have remembered me mentioning that I was looking for a way. I had a little audio issue on Thursday where I went dark for a hot second, and you guys could see me, but you couldn't hear me. And I said, man, it would be great if there was like a flashing light or something that showed me that I didn't have any audio. And then shout out to Tom over in the UK who said, that like the UK Zen guy, he has one of those, right? So I downloaded that. It's on my screen. And yeah, it totally shows that the audio is coming through. And if I hit by accident the audio mute button, it starts like playing an alarm and showing a big red flashing screen, which is precisely what I asked for. So that's pretty cool. Pretty awesome to have you guys jump in and help me out with that sort of stuff. So all right, so YouTube sounds all right. Let me know how it sounds on your end. Whoa, chat's underway. What's going on? Transmission AV. I heard that maybe Brayton was the catalyst for bringing you over to the show here this morning. He's a good guy. Thanks for jumping on. We just got our first 4250 this week. Got 4 P200s cruising under right now. Looking forward to this talk. Thank you. You're very welcome. What's going on, Kevin? Howdy. Good to see you again, man. Hey, does the P110 120 fit on the same ceiling mount as the P200? No, I do not believe so. That's a great question. Hey, sales. Anybody in sales here? See, it has the threaded mount, that I know, but I don't know about the actual ceiling mount. So, because it's a smaller base, it's about the size of a P100 base, and so that's it's a similar size to the 100, not the 200. So I don't think so, but we'll see if sales is around and see if there's a ceiling mount for that. Hey, what's going on? Hello, thanks for jumping on. Aguida.tv. I'm butchering that, I'm sure. Hey, thanks for jumping on. Really sorry for butchering your name, but thanks for hanging out with us here today. I really appreciate that. Ooh, I made the montage. There you go. You did. Your name does appear in the montage. New lights. Look at that. Yep, those have been. You've been gone for a while apparently, because I feel like those have been around for a while now, at least a month, maybe a month. Maybe that's all. Maybe it's like 3 weeks or something like that. But yes, the lights are new and it's got some color. And if I wear white in a shirt, then it all stands out. So that's pretty cool. Hey, he's not wearing all black. Yes, I do possess other clothing. That does exist in my wardrobe. I used to wear button downs a lot more, polos and that sort of thing. So maybe it's the start of something coming back, but we'll see, NetHab. Today's weather here in Auburn Hills, 71 and mostly cloudy. It's true. And if I had a camera on the Auburn Hills road, I would show that to you. However, I don't, because he's sitting right here for today's episode of All Things NDI. And so we are going to get into the 4250 today. That is the plan. That's what the announcement is. And we're going to talk about basic setup, but I'm also going to do you a favor, and we're going to talk about static DHCP static addresses as well. So DHCP reservation lists, or MAC reservation lists, however you want to put it. We're talking about that as well. So it's kind of a two-parter. There'll be a basic setup, which is what the title of the show is, but then there's also going to be this little extra thing that we do to show you how to do the DHCP reservation list. There's a couple of catches with that, so watch out for that. But yeah, good times. You'll also notice a degraded image on some of these secondary shots. That's just an attempt to keep my CPU lower. When I have them all on full res, they basically just choke the CPU out of this computer. So what I'm doing is the main camera, and there's a P400 and there's a P100. And I think even this one today, this 120, which is the side shot we're going to use for this demonstration, they're all running at full value, but a couple of them are low bandwidth. And so that's saving on CPU while we do this show. So yeah, there you go. But yeah, as the playlist goes through, you'll see that. vMix has a no audio meter. Oh, that's good to know. I didn't know that. Sounds good. Oh, good. Good. Okay. Assuming that it's Spanish. Yeah, that I don't know. Hey, I have a problem with the BirdDog keyboard. When I update the board to the latest version, I can't see any more that keyboard preview video in NDI monitor. So you mean the keyboard router? That's an interesting problem. You can't see it anymore. I mean, there's lots of questions there. So first off, because the latest firmware includes that keyboard router option, so I would go into the keyboard and see if there's a place to restart, because all it's doing is retransmitting whatever stream you're looking at. And so I would go in there and see if there's a way to reboot or restart the device from there. Not reboot, but restart. On the cameras, it's called restart video. Same thing on the converters, just to see if it's the NDI chip that needs to be restarted, which is very possible that that's what needs to happen, but not 100%. Oh, the P400 image is low bandwidth too as well, if you're playing along. So there's that. But yeah, check out the web UI. Also make sure that if you're using, like, networking is going to be an issue with this keyboard question, right? So like if you have groups, if you're using any customization and access manager, if you're using discovery server, all that stuff, there's kind of a bunch of questions that need to be asked there, unless it's just straight up flat TCP network, which is becoming more rare these days, apparently. But anyways, so does anyone else have that same problem? That I don't know. This question is identical to the one that was asked earlier, so I'm assuming you're the same guy. But yeah, give those things a try. Check out, check out the web UI and make sure that it didn't. If you're using groups, make sure it's in the group again. Like doing the firmware update is going to wipe everything, and so you definitely need to make sure that you re-add all the cameras and you put it all back in the groups and you do all the customization that you did to make sure that it's all talking again. So I already tried that, but I didn't have any success. Restarted the video from the keyboard. Web UI worked for us. So transmission, hey, welcome. Thanks for jumping in here. So yeah, restart video from keyboard web UI. I actually don't have a keyboard on my little isolated network here right now, but I do have a keyboard here. So we can test that. If you hang around for a bit and you want me to test that live, I can definitely try that and see what what I can come up with. I'm not in sales, but the ceiling mount on our website shows that it fits the P100, the 200, the 400. So I assume that the 110 and 120 would also fit. So yeah, if it's listed for the P100, then I'm pretty sure that that would be just fine, because it is the same actual form factor. So comparing the 200 to a 110 now, based on eyeball test, the thread locations look to be in the same dimension. So boom. See, that's why I have guys that are not sitting live on camera that can actually look this stuff up. So thanks, Brayden. Appreciate that. Okay, so Lars says that, hey, I did a concert on Saturday, M4255 BirdDog Flex 4Ks. It worked flawlessly. Fantastic. That's wonderful. We are going to talk about some of that today because it's really, getting the network right is really important. And it's funny because over the ages that I've been here, I've had run-ins with guys that, know more than me, or at least assume they do. And so when you say something like, oh, you really should use an AV switch, or there are better switches out there than Linksys, they get all offended. But in general, obviously you'll get the performance out of the network for what you put into it. And so if you buy expensive cameras but you cheap out on the network, well, then you should not be surprised if you get bad results. So in Bonjour, the keyboard only appears as comms. So I would verify that your baseboard and your firmware are on the latest, and I'd verify them by redoing the whole process, the installation process again, because I do know that keyboard router thing is a major feature, and so something isn't right there. Maybe the baseboard didn't get upload or done correctly, or maybe it needs, like, the actual firmware got corrupted when it got written. I don't know. There could be a handful of things that would stop that, but all it is a retransmission. It's not actually generating NDI truthfully. So I would check out that firmware version and make sure that it's make sure that you just redo the firmware. Now, if you're also paying attention, I've recently redone the USB firmware format video. So if you go to our knowledge database, or you go over to our BirdDog YouTube page under tutorials, I've changed it to a more recent one, and it talks about using 256 megs instead of using 8 gigs. And so follow that video now. That's found in the knowledge database on our website, but also on YouTube. So there's that as well. Check that out. Yeah, it was rock solid. Perfect ground to build on. I fully agree with you. Good stuff. Hey, Brian. Hey, from Boston. Going to take the new tech course, networking course, like you recommended in the other video. If there's anything that you would add to that, would love to hear it today. Yeah, new tech course is great. Kane does a great job with that course, and it goes over a lot of the NDI protocol. It does go into a fair bit of, like, NDI from new tech specifically, not from, like, the broad manufacturing realm, but specifically like the PTZ 1, 2, and 3 cameras and Spark Pro. And so expect a little bit of that marketing salesy side to it. But there's a lot of great information in there about networks, and there's a lot of great information there about the generations of NDI and how it's kind of grown over the past little while. So Kane does a great job with that course, and I have taken it. And the good news is that him and I are saying pretty much the exact same thing when it comes to networks. He goes into why managed networks are pretty much a no-brainer, and why everybody should be using those. So that's a great course to take. We cover a lot of that here on the show as well, and so I don't have a lot to add to that, other than a lot to add to Kane's understanding, obviously, of the NDI world, of the NDI network, because he's at the coalface of all of it. But yeah, it's a great course to take. I would also strongly recommend that you find a Network Plus certification course. You don't have to get certified, but just take the course, and to learn better about networks in general, because that will give you a deeper appreciation and understanding of how networks work. And so something like that would be great. I don't necessarily, I mean, they're good courses, but I don't necessarily recommend the, like, CCNA stuff. There's a lot of free stuff on YouTube that you can check out. I found a few today that I was looking at. One about, like, bad network design versus good network design. However, my only complaint there is like the good network design was like, as long as you don't have a budget, like, sky's the limits. So he was adding a lot of redundancy, which is great. You should. so that if a switch or a connection gets cut or goes down, goes down or gets cut respectively, then the whole network doesn't pack up. But he definitely was not. He flat out said, "This is all very expensive stuff. It's super expensive and it's very expensive, and so this is expensive." And I was like, "Well, I appreciate you being candid about that. Like this design that you're talking about is crazy expensive, and it is." He was doing the CCNA. He was trying to walk through the CCNA stuff, which is totally fine. And that is a career path for people. Being Cisco certified, and that's great. You make a lot of money doing that. But when we're talking about NDI and like running NDI networks, it's better to have more of a grounding education of networks. So Network Plus, and then the new tech course would be really helpful. So as to get a better appreciation of NDI and that sort of thing. So, and remember, please don't throw sausage pizza away. NetHab, did you get hacked? Because that's a very strange thing to say. All right. So today's show, among other things, is primarily going to be about the Netgear 4250. And we're going to talk through a lot of how you set it up and how you get it going. I want to show firmware update process. I want to show a bunch of stuff and just kind of walk you through all of the options that it has. And so I am going to stop my camera playlist, and I'm going to go over here now to the first screen that I want to cut to, and this is just the 4250 switch. A little hard to see because I've got a camera in a studio, a couple of Ethernet cables here. All I've done is I've flipped the switch on the back, and then I've powered it up, and it is currently running, currently on, and that's about as far as I've taken it. So we want to go from like basically unboxing it into getting NDI up and running on this switch as I see it as of today, and hopefully this gives you a good grounding as to where to start. Now, Netgear has done a lot of legwork in getting the switch to a place where you can plug it in and pretty much get up and running in like within the hour, and that's super helpful. And I want to talk through some of the things that, as I understand it in my conversations with Netgear, how this stuff sort of works. And so, let's go down that path and start to kind of like discover what some of this stuff will do. I'll try and keep an eye on the chat, but please don't throw sausage pizza away is physical data link network transport session presentation application. That's amazing. I love it. Well done, NetHab. All right, so we're going to try and stay on task here. I will keep an eye on the chat in case stuff comes up, but then I'll do a follow-up. I'll try and scroll back and answer questions at the end, okay? So we're also going to try and make some of this available online after the fact, so we'll try and keep it as like a training. Okay, the first thing that when we talk about the 4250, the first thing that we want to do is probably get it up to date, right? And we need to get it connected to our system so that we can do some of the basic functions. And so the first thing that we want to do is we want to go here, and on the back of the switch, there's a port that's called the OOB port. And this is basically a port that you can use to direct interface with the switch regardless of its configuration. Okay, so it's actually super helpful. I know some network guys that actually put these ports on patch panels and label those patch panels, and then when they're in their network room, they just click into that one with their computer and they can access the actual switch from there. The switch will have the same IP address on that OOB port, and so it's super easy to put your computer on that network port and then connect your switch to it. So let's go ahead. I have this cable pre-plugged into my computer, and I'm going to plug this into the OOB port. Now, one of the things that you should do is we're going to go to our control panel, and let me share this on a secondary screen with you so that you can see what it is that I'm up to. Okay, so we're going to go over to control panel, and I'm over here in the corner, by the way. We're going to go over here to control panel and go to network and sharing center. And here we are going to go to change adapter settings. Now, for most of you, you won't have like additional network ports disabled and that sort of thing, other than your Wi-Fi, because you're a good NDI guy and you don't use Wi-Fi for NDI. So we're going to watch these network ports, and the easiest way to find out which port is the one that you're using is just all the ones that are currently in disconnect. When you plug this in, it's going to query the, it's going to show activity on it. So what I'm going to do is plug this in into the OOB port, and we're just going to watch the actual network connections here. And boom, there's one that's called internet. And so this one right here, that it appears to be connected to. So this is the port that I want to use. And we are going to just jump. We're going to, whoops, it always opens on the second screen, which is why I want to make sure I'm doing this right here. But okay, so it's going to open this for, let me put this on the screen real quick. Okay, it's going to open this. If you double click on it, it's going to open this little screen right here, right? Internet status, double click. And we're going to say properties. Bueller. And then we're going to say IPv4, double click on IPv4 and say use the following address. Now we got to put this on the same network as the switch is, right? Now the default as of today is 192.168.0.239. That's the address of the OOB port. So I got to get my computer on that same network. So 192.168, let's say 0.100. Okay, that's a safe number. And then our network mask, if you hit tab and it goes to the next one, it's going to fill it in for a single subnet, so 22255, which is fine. And here, I'm just going to say 192.168.0.239 as the default gateway, which is this switch that we're using, right? So I'm going to go ahead and click OK and click OK. And now our network here is going to identify as network 5 and show that we're connected to a network that's speaking the same language for the most part. All right, so now we got to open up, you can close all these. Now we got to open up Chrome, and I'm going to try and do this inside of an incognito browser. We'll see how this goes. And the first thing I want to do is acquire the firmware for my switch. So what I did was I typed in the almighty Google, Netgear 4250 dash, and then the number that's on the front of this switch. So that's dash 10G2F dash PoE plus. And it came back with, you probably have the 4212P, which is correct. That's what this switch is. So if I click on that link, there we go. It's going to take me to this support site, okay? And I just typed in like firmware download or whatever it was that I'm looking for. So take me here, and I'm going to say downloads. It's going to oddly slide me down the page. And then here, firmware version 13.0.4.8 for 4250 switches with 16 or less ports. There is my switch right there listed in the details. So I'm going to click download and bring that. Now, I've already downloaded the file. Spoiler alert. Okay, now I'm going to open up a new window, and I'm going to say 192.168.0.239. And it's going to take me to the web UI of this switch. Now, also, spoiler alert, I have already logged into this switch because this is one that we had at NAB that we purchased. So I believe the login and password is just admin. Correct me in the chat if I'm wrong, but I believe the default is that, but you can find that in the manual that comes with the switch. So if that's wrong, just look it up in the manual. So I've changed the password on my switches. All my switches have different passwords, and you can click login. Now, this is that user interface that is so legendary when it comes to the 4250 line. And the reason for this is that it's designed to be fairly user-friendly and self-explanatory when we are navigating the web UI of the 4250. So we've logged in. Now, the first thing we want to do is make sure that we're running the latest firmware. Now here, we can already see that we're out of date because firmware version 13.0.2.34, and I believe that it was like 0.4 point something, right? So we want to update that, make sure that we've got the latest. So here, we're going to go to maintenance, and we're going to say upload. And I've downloaded this to my desktop. So here it is right here, 4.8. We're going to say open, and we are going to upload. Now, this is probably going to take a few minutes, but we're going to let the switch do its thing, and it will probably take me back to the login screen when it's finished. So this is a wild card right now. I do not know what to expect, but let's go ahead and wait for this to upload. It says it was 100%, so we're probably in reboot. It looks like we are. So we're going to reboot this switch. Oh yeah, and also just FYI, Mr. Transmission AV says the Netgear Engage app is very convenient versus the browser. I have not used that yet. Okay, we're going to reboot this switch now. I have not used that yet, but that is a recent announcement as of like last week, and we're going to do a show on that Engage browser. This is just basic. I got one switch. I'm going to use this for my show. I want to learn how to use it. That's what this is all about. So I'm excited about that Engage app because I think that'll make a big difference in the end. Okay, so let's reboot this switch and see what happens here now. We're going to go back to maintenance. I clicked reboot, so let's see if that's actually functioning. What firmware file? Let's log out of this and log back in. Let's see what firmware file we actually got. I did hear it just reboot, so it's probably just caching those websites by now. But yeah. I want to buy the Switch. How much? I think they start at like 600 or 700 or something like that. So they're pretty affordable in the networking world. And if you're spending 10 grand on cameras, definitely budget for a 4250 that can assist with this. Okay, so when the WebUI reloads, it should reload at this same address. So we'll give it some more time. What's going on, iPhone? Good to see you, man. We'll give it a couple of minutes just to reboot the WebUI. When it comes back, then we'll jump back into it. As a part of this demonstration, I have resurrected my BirdDog Studio, which sits here on a regular basis. This is convenient because it'll show the IP addresses nice and large. And then I've also got a P100, which I haven't tested really, but this is the Auburn Hills, the Auburn Road shot that I normally use on this show. So I'm pretty sure we'll be all right when it comes to that. Netgear is still booting. Now, the thing you also need to remember about switches is that they do take a couple of minutes to kind of get going. And so don't be in a rush when you're doing this, and definitely don't upgrade when you have a pending production in the next, like today. Give yourself some time to do this and make sure that you have it set up correctly and that you understand exactly what it is that you're doing. Because if you don't, yeah, you may be up against a reconfiguration that you weren't planning on doing moments before the show, and that's always super stressful. So don't do that. That's not always the best plan. All right. I'm going to just give this another minute. I may power cycle this switch, but I do want it to... I did physically click reboot on the inside the WebUI, and it is power cycling, so I'm going to close that. So some of the things that we're going to do today inside this switch, as long as it comes back to life, is we're going to set up our own VLAN for our NDI network. We're going to talk about why that is superior over other designs. We're going to then put our devices on that VLAN with an internal DHCP. So technically this is layer 3 that we're going to be operating in the networking realm, but we're going to create our own DHCP on this switch. And then that is going to govern all of our data and handle the routing and do all that sort of good stuff, opposed to an unmanaged switch, which basically doesn't really do any of that. I mean, it varies. I had an interesting discussion. I debated whether I'd bring this up, but I think I will. I had an interesting discussion with a client last week about the differences between unmanaged switches and hubs. And he was right. I mean, the very definition of a hub and an unmanaged switch, they're different. The hub is the thing that would like duplicate all the packets and just send it out, whereas an unmanaged switch doesn't necessarily do that. However, I always think that it's strange that it still looks like a duck and sounds like a duck and walks like a duck. And if it's all of those things, then it's pretty much identical. And in the networking world, they actually don't make hubs very much anymore. I'm sure you could probably find some obscure networking company that makes them, but most networking companies have switched to low value, in terms of low cost, unmanaged switches. And that's what makes them so attractive, is that you can just stack those on the shelf for $40 a piece and fire up a switch if you need to. However, if you go through the Networking Plus course, or if you do CCNA training or anything like that, you're going to find that most most trainers are going to gravitate directly to managed switches, which is what we're doing today, mostly because there's a whole lot more sophistication and it's a little better with managing. It's actually not a little better. It's a lot better with managing the actual data on the network. So, yeah, I had an interesting conversation last week about that. And it was fun to kind of go down that road because and the new tech course will cover, or I'm sorry, the new tech course will cover this. Kane literally says we don't recommend using unmanaged switches. So I found that interesting. Anyways, okay, so our web UI did come back eventually. That took a little longer, but hey, like I said in the first section of this tutorial, is switches do take some time to reboot, and so we need to give them the appropriate time to do this. Now, we can verify that our firmware now is correct. So 13.048 is what we are looking at now. So we're running the latest firmware, and that is fantastic. Now, let's start talking about just this dashboard real quick. This is a quick little snapshot as to what this network is doing. We have, in general, just so you understand, we have empty ports on this switch that are not connected to anything yet. We have power on each of these. These are all PoE plus ports. This is a PoE plus switch. So we have power available on each of these. However, there is a maximum budget on this switch, and I think is it 150 watts? Is that what this one is? I'm pretty sure it's like 150 watts. So that's not a ton of power. The switch will do what it can to manage, that. And if you have a studio, you're running PoE, and so only issue 15 watts. If you have a camera, that's PoE plus, that's like 19 watts or more. And so it will do what it can to manage that and make the rest available to the network. But the switch does have a maximum. And so you can't run, 8 4K cameras on this particular switch because you'll run out of power. That's just reality. But know what power budget you have and how much you have to work with, and then give yourself 20%. So the general rule is always give yourself an overhead of 20% on PoE, and everything will hum along just fine, and you won't have brownouts and cameras that are randomly rebooting because they all of a sudden require 19 watts and not 15, and brown out and then go into a reboot cycle. So be careful with your power budget. But this screen shows that I have power available to each of these. It also gives us a nice little quick overview as to what the switch can see about the device. And so tells us how much wattage is actually being used, tells us what VLAN the port is in. It tells us a bunch of things. Now, it also sometimes will tell you what the IP address is of the device that's plugged into this port, and sometimes it will learn the MAC address as well, but sometimes it won't. And so it's not a hard and fast rule. It's helpful, but it's not gospel. And so we need to be kind of careful with that as we go forward. Now, we also have a general overview of our configured profiles. We're going to get into that in a second. And computer companies, networking companies, companies that make stuff like BirdDog, we're getting a lot smarter with showing this stuff so that you can see what's going on your network. And so CPU utilization, how much CPU is being used on this switch, of the onboard CPU inside the switch. I said this one time to somebody. I said, well, there's managed switches, there are like CPUs, and the managed ones will actually manage the CPU usage better than the unmanaged ones. And sometimes the unmanaged ones don't really even have much onboard power. And they were like, switches don't have CPUs. And I was like, yes, they do. They 100% do. So there's CPU in here, and there's also onboard memory. And these are the things that help traffic the data across the network. And so it's important to know that. Finally, on the right-hand side, there are actually fans inside this switch. And depending on where you're installing them, you can turn them on full blast, and they sound like real deal fans. I can even do this. I don't know if you'll be able to hear it, but that's a doozy. You would not want to necessarily work in a room with these fans running like this. However, if they're in a headroom or in a closet somewhere or whatever, you could run these at full blast because sound doesn't matter, and do it that way. So I don't know if you can hear that or not, but it's pretty loud. And then we can also turn them down to quiet mode, which is what I suggest most people run these in, especially if the switches are in a place where they're going to be around people. Quiet mode will at least keep the sensors cool, and they will turn up if they if the actual switch heat kind of gets a little too high, and so it will try and keep it quiet at all times. Now, the other mode is off, and this is ideal if you have internal cooling inside your rack, because then the thing doesn't make any sound at all. But they actually make rack units that have like air conditioners in them, basically, that keep your whole stack cold. Switches, you may not know this, but switches blow the air from one side to the other, like I think it's from right to left. Let's see, or left to right, one or the other. That doesn't really matter. And then servers go from front to back traditionally. And so depending on how you've designed your actual network rack and whatever, that will dictate how you cool them. But there are onboard fans. For the most part, the quiet setting is good enough for having the switch in the room with you. The switch that's down there that runs all the cameras in my studio runs in quiet mode, and it generally can't be picked up from this microphone. And this one is now returned to quiet mode, and it's awfully quiet. So that is really cool. And you can change that right here on the dashboard. No need to go into like maintenance settings and blah, blah, blah. It's just one click and it does it. And then it gives you the actual sensor temperatures and that sort of thing right here. So you want to keep that as low as possible, but monitor that over time, especially after productions or during productions. That's a good piece of information to know. So that's our dashboard. Great stuff. Now we get right into it right away. So let's go over. We're going to click on network profiles. And here, I want to just explain what a couple of these things are, and then we're going to set one up. You can, right off the bat, turn on and off a feature called Auto Trunk, which is something that Netgear does a lot of marketing promotion about, basically because you can trunk lines back to other switches. So if you have a bigger network design, and we did this at NAB in April, where we had 2 fibers that went from each fiber port, and it went back to a fiber core. And we did not have to do any configuration for that trunk. The trunk is basically a really weak definition, but basically think of it like a giant pipe where all of the data for all the VLANs goes down. And so that's what it is. And you can link more than one. Well, if you link more than one, then it becomes an auto trunk, and the switches will figure that out. So we leave auto trunk on, and if you then take those 2 fiber ports and plug them into like a fiber core, the core will figure that out, that this is the same switch. Let's trunk those 2 lines, and then it gives you twice as much throughput, and they work together. Okay, so you have on a multi-mode fiber, you have transmit and receive, and so now instead of a 1 gig in this instance port, you would have a 2 gig pipe or a 2 gig trunk. And so auto trunk is actually super easy, and it's designed to make it quick getting these things installed and up and running. I will attest to this, by the way, that at NAB, I had probably a dozen switches all coming back to a fiber trunk, which had, I don't know, 16 fiber ports on it. Plus we were doing a bunch of other stuff with fiber. Well, anyways, we ran 2 lines back for every single switch, every table, we'll say every zone, and plugged those in. And I did not have to configure trunks. The switches figured it out for me. Super cool, super easy. Strongly suggest that if you're going to do that, like if you're going to have 2 switches, for example, trunk those things. Seriously, trunk them together because that will never be the bottleneck then if you get into that. Okay, so you can do trunking there, and then there's PTP residency time stamping. This is in general, just you can leave that off as default for NDI because all of these profiles are specifically made for your application. Now, there's more in here than just NDI, right? There's a whole bunch of stuff that you can leaf through these and figure out which ones that you want to use. But the 2 that we want to focus on are the NDI 4 and the NDI 5 profiles. BirdDog has moved all the cameras to an NDI 5, and that is our stable firmware that we are now using. And so we are functioning out of the NDI 5 profile, and this is how you would configure any of these profiles, but this is how you do it. So we're going to click on the little cog wheel here next to the NDI 5. It says with Dante QSys. What they've done is they've worked with NewTek, they've worked with BirdDog, they've worked with QSys installers, they've worked with a whole bunch of folks, and Dante in particular, and figured out how to do all of these profiles and combined it into the same profile. So that's pretty cool. If you click on the cogwheel, this will start to help you configure the switch. Now, what I want to do is I want all of the Ethernet ports on this switch to be on the same enclosed DHCP network. And so we're going to create our own VLAN, which means that, well, it doesn't specifically mean, but it means that these ports are going to communicate with each other, but they're not going to interfere if we connect this switch to another network. They're not going to interfere with that network. They're going to keep it isolated, keep it local. And if you're setting up a single 4250 switch for your install, this is the way to do it. Maybe in an advanced course, we're going to talk about trunking between switches and how VLANs can cross through the trunks. But for today's purposes, let's set up a single VLAN on this switch. So the first thing I'm going to do is we're going to light up each of these ports. You just click on them. Super easy. And we have 10 Ethernet ports on this switch, and 2 of them, 9 and 10, are non-PoE. So these ports are great for non-PoE devices. Let's say we have a camera that's plugged in with DC power. Maybe we got a computer. Maybe we got a computer with 2 NIC cards. You can plug them both into 9 and 10 and not take up any ports that require PoE. So these switches, this is like an entry-level switch with Netgear. You can pay whatever you want for more sophisticated stuff. But this guy right here is one of their lower levels and works really well. So here we go. We're going to light up each of these ports with the green check mark. And then I'm going to say, this is my NDI network. Okay, I'm going to call my profile name NDI network because this will be my install switch. VLAN ID. Now, if you're doing multiple profiles on switches, especially across multiple switches, this will be really important. But here we can pick an arbitrary number other than 1. Okay, don't pick 1. But a lot of networking guys like to work in increments of 10. So they do VLAN 10, 20, 30, 40, and then they know VLAN 20 is Dante, VLAN 10 is NDI, VLAN across the entire network. So in this instance, let's go with 10 because I think that's an appropriate number. This is a customized thing just in Netgear. This color means nothing other than just here on this interface. So pick a color, pick your favorite color, or pick a color that you are going to use consistently across your entire fleet. Okay, that's the basic setup. Now, let's talk about the routing and the DHCP stuff. We're going to flip this switch and turn it green, and it's going to say your VLAN IP settings. So this is the base of the VLAN, okay? The very, well, for, again, a lack of a better term, how you would, for example, contact this switch on this VLAN, okay? So this VLAN is going to have its own DHCP. It's going to have more than 200 IP addresses. How do we get back to this switch if we're on this network? Okay, so there's a couple of philosophies here. Some people like to use the last IP address in the pool, which is 254, and some people like to use the first IP address in the pool. If you have a group of switches inside your network, I suggest that you plan to use specific IP addresses that are in sequence. Okay, so use 1 through 10, or use 200 to 254, or whatever you're going to do. But in this instance, I'm going to say my network 192.168, and we're going to call this VLAN. I want it to be kind of unique than anything else that I have in this office. So I'm going to call it 85. Okay, that's my NDI network, and I'm going to say .1. And then I'm going to click tab, and it's already done the subnet mask for me, a single subnet. This is proper for NDI, and that's why it fills it in for you. Please pay attention to that. That's a really important piece. And then DHCP server. Do you want this switch to act as a DHCP server for this VLAN? And I'm going to say yes. So I'm going to click DHCP server. The default router is this switch because this is going to end up being the backbone for this NDI network. So .1 is correct. The pool start and pool end. Okay. When your DHCP operates, what IP addresses do you want it to issue? Do you want it to issue everything? Or do you want to reserve a few so that, like, maybe we're going to get switches online and we want to set them up this way? So let's just say I'm going to have, 10 switches total. So I want to start my pool at 85.11. Okay. So that I have room for 10 switches on my network, and they'll be 85.1, .2, .3, .4, and so on. So DHCP server pool will start at .11, which means that when I plug a device into the network, it should get 85 something, but it will never get 1 through 10. Okay, so we're going to start the pool at 11. We're going to end it at 254. That's appropriate. Now, the DNS server, this is tricky. In my instance, I'm not going to want to access the internet from my NDI network. I have 2 NIC cards. Actually, I've got like 4 NIC cards on this computer. One of them is going to be plugged into a network that has internet, and that's how I'm going to pipe out my stream to YouTube. But if I wanted to get internet on this network, you would need to put probably the default router, the default gateway of the network that this switch is also connected to. So over the fiber ports, for example, the default gateway number of that network that has internet. So in my instance here, that would be 192.168.1.1. Okay. But this switch is not going to be plugged into that network, and it's not going to be plugged into the internet. And so you can actually leave this spot blank. It's going to act independently. I'm going to put this switch inside of a Pelican case, and I'm going to put my cameras in next to the Pelican case. And when I show up to a gig, I'm going to put this on a table, plug it into power, let it boot up for 2.5 minutes, and then plug in my cameras. The DHCP is going to issue those IP addresses because it's DHCP, and we're going to get off to the races by plugging in my computer to port 9 and 10, which are also a part of my NDI VLAN. So we're going to get 2 gigs over to my computer. NDI does its own load balancing, by the way. So if you do have 2 NIC cards on a computer and you plug them both into the same switch, it should, if you have a modern day computer, it should issue 2 MAC addresses and get 2 individual IP addresses and so on and so forth. So then I get 2 gigs back from my switch. I can plug in my 3 cameras, and bandwidth is not going to be an issue. So that's fine to leave these as blank if you don't plan on connecting these to a greater network that has internet. You don't need to access internet through it, and so on and so forth. Okay, so boom, boom. Those can be blank, and the search domain can remain blank. The lease time in minutes, 240 minutes. A lot of guys change this to like 1 day because, they're going to set up today and they just don't want it to change off in a few hours. And so they'll change this to 1 day. And what is that? So 24 hours times 60, that is 1440. So you could change that lease time to 1440 if you wanted to, and that would be fine. And now we take our blue button and click apply. We really recommend that you set up DHCP servers. Yeah, I know. But I've already explained why we're not doing that. And so there we go. Okay. We want to be sure that this shows success, and does that. Okay. And then we want to roll up here, and just to be safe, I'm going to click save. All right. You have noticed now that there are green ports on my dashboard that show that they belong to VLAN 10, which is the NDI 5 profile. And if I plug something into there, I should get a 85 address. So 192.168.85 dot something address. And we can actually test that now. Here is the moment of truth, everybody, because I do have a trusty dusty studio, which still works. And I've got a camera. Now the camera doesn't show an IP address, but the studio will. So let's go ahead and plug that in and see if I get an 85 address. Now we're plugged into port 2, and you may be able to see that the PoE light turned on port 2. So I know that that's working. And now the network traffic, the actual network activity port is also flickering. So that's good news. That means the network card is working inside of my studio, and it's requesting an IP address. So now we're going to wait and see if my startup changes and gives me an IP address that's in the 85 range. And if it does, then we know that we're good to go with TCP. Now, by default, right, all the BirdDog products are running in TCP. I think maybe in NDI 5, they might switch. Oh, 85. Yay! 85.11. There it is, everybody. So good news. That worked, and we're good to go there. So now we can go back to our web UI. That's pretty exciting stuff. And let's go ahead and refresh this page because it's a web UI. Remember that, right? So it's a web UI, so it doesn't live update all the time. And we're going to go to Overview, and now we're going to take a look. Port 2 has a green, it's hard to see because my color is green, but it does have a green outline on it, which means that it's connected. Oh, check that out. It shows Microchip Technology as the host, which is the manufacturer for the chips that were in the studio. It does give us a MAC address. It does give us the IP address that's associated. That's cool. And it shows that it's drawing 6 watts. And it's running over gigabit. It's not restricted to 10100. So lots of useful information. It even says that I belong to VLAN 10, which we already know that, but hey, that's really helpful. If you were just new to this, that's a lot of useful information, right? So this little device is running in TCP, and we are getting an IP address 85.11. So we could go to that IP address if we want to join this network and do that. So first is we're all good to go there. Our DHCP is now working. Okay, so that's the network profile page. Next, let's jump into the link aggregation page and just talk briefly about what this is, because some of this stuff you might want to use, but if you're trunking things, I don't think you'll need to. And I can demonstrate this in a more advanced course, but as it is right now, this is so up top we have auto lag, which is auto trunk and auto lag are things that again are a part of the marketing deal with the way that Netgear is trying to promote these switches as being fairly user friendly. And so the lag settings on these, unless you are like in the network administration realm, the lag settings, you can do all of these independently, but the beautiful thing is that they've basically allow you to, it does it all for you. And so if you are setting up lags on your network, and again, in the advanced coverage of the 4250, we'll actually go into here and set up a lag. But just in general, if you don't know what all this is, if you are connecting lags through your network, this will allow you to do it kind of automatically with the switch itself. And so you have to create a lag, select what ports are on the lag, go through all that. Like you actually click on create lag, and then you would say like 10 and 11, and you'd name it. You'd set your actual layer that you're going to function that lag on, and so on and so forth, and change it probably to static. But it can also just do it for you. So some of this is like, we've already optimized these switches for AV stuff, and unless there's something very particular, like if QSys or Crestron or somebody needs something very specific, you can customize those lags, but you don't necessarily have to. Okay, let's keep going here. The multicast. So an interesting thing about multicast on the 4250 line, multicast is actually already baked in, where you don't need to do any customization for it. Okay, I learned this one day in April when I was setting up for NAB, and I said, "Oh, now show me how to do this multicast, because we may switch it over to reduce the network requirements, because we're gonna have a lot of stuff on our network." And the guy that I was talking to was just like, "It's ready. If you start sending it multicast packets, the switch will recognize them as multicast and will handle the multicast stuff already in the NDI 5 profile," which, like, that's a huge deal. All right. Yeah. Because in the past, we used to say, no, you have to go in and configure for multicast, probably need to get a network administrator on board and have them set it up correctly for you. NewTek flat out said, contact us directly if you want to talk about multicast and how to set it up, because you probably won't do it right if you just try and do it by yourself, which I thought was crazy. The NewTek course talks a little bit about multicast, but again, they kind of urge you to reach out to them if you want to do multicast. Well, Netgear went one step further. They called NewTek and they talked about this NDI profile, and then they set it up to do multicast automatically if you start sending multicast packets across. So I thought that was huge, because that simplifies, if you all of a sudden start rolling out a larger NDI network and you need to switch to multicast, it's pretty much set to the default NDI settings already with the NDI 5 profile. So you can start going through and turning things on in multicast, and it should start operating correctly. So that's great, which means that customizing this for multicast is not necessarily required. The PoE actual tab on this will show you what your power budget currently is running at, like how much your consumption is. Oh, I'm sorry, this switch is 125 watts. That's the maximum there that shows on the screen, but it will show you in live, in actual live feedback, how many watts are being drawn down. Very specific, actually. They say 6 up here, but it's 5.7 actually is what's really being drawn, which is handy. And it tells you how much is going out on which port. And so if I were to plug in a camera, let's do that now. I'm gonna plug in a P100, and we're gonna give it some time to actually like kind of get going. And then I'm just gonna refresh this screen, and we will see how much on port 1, how much power is being drawn. So it's in the boot up cycle now. So let's go ahead and refresh this. There we go. 11.9 watts are being drawn down, or we'll say 12, just be equal. And again, we have this little handy meter here that says, okay, you're using 18 watts out of your 125 budget. Now, this is not maximum. This is current. And so you need to know that if you are drawing down, this is the current drawdown. Now, if I take that P100, I start steering it around, it's going to draw down more power than just, you know, the 12 watts that it's currently taking. And so don't take that as the P100 only takes 11.9 watts. It currently needs 11.9 watts as it sits idle, but it needs more than that if you move the motors and that sort of thing. So the general rule is for cameras, budget 30 watts. You'll be safe. If you, for the P100, the P110, 120, for the P200, the P400, and the P4K, budget 30 watts. Okay. For the A200 and A300, you need a budget 97 watts, and you need to be able to output that on the port, which means that you probably need an injector. We're testing some right now, but that's for a different show. So anyways, the PoE tab for you users is really handy because it tells you what class PoE you're running, and it also tells you what actual wattage is being used in this moment. So that's really handy, and you can just refresh this and it will check again. See, 11.6, so it changes, 5.8. It's changing a little bit because we've got both of our Studio and our P100 are currently up and running off of this switch, getting 85 addresses. So let's go back actually real quick to our overview. Now, both of these are lit up. So here, this is that P100. So it says 12 watts. It gives us 85.12. So we know that it acquired a new IP address at the 85 address. So we know our DHCP is working just fine, which is fantastic. And, it's showing that it's drawing down those 12 watts at a full gigabit throughput. So that's pretty awesome. Port configuration. This is the live stats when things are plugged in here. It kind of gives us an overview as to what's going on. So there's that green outline, but this is showing that data is working. Full duplex is underway here. So that's a gig at full. It's set to auto, but it is running full duplex right now. Frame size is 1500. That is pretty much gospel at this point. Because frame sizes should not be jumbo for an NDI network. And so you need to make sure that you're running 1500 frames. That's like an NDI standard, which comes across with the actual profile. You'll notice that 11 and 12, which are our fiber ports, have jumbo frames available, but that's because they're outside of that NDI 5 profile. So jumbo frames are, 1998 is listed there, but all of the ones inside the NDI 5 profile are going to be listed at 1500, and that's correct. Flow control is disabled. This is, again, correct by paper, but we've noticed actually that it's possible to get better results with NDI 5 with flow control enabled. And so the way that you would change that is you can say port interface settings, and you can select all ports and then take the ones that you're not using off, and then say frame size, flow control, and then I believe it's asymmetric. Let me verify that actually, because I'm sorry, I'm not showing you this. So you can click on, let me back this up so you can see. So port interface settings, and then we're going to click on enabled. We're going to say select all, disconnect or uncheck our fiber ports, and then flow control, you can just say asymmetric, I believe. Let me, and this is what I need to verify. Give me a second here. Frame size 1500 is correct, and then we just say for NDI. Just give me a hot second and jump over onto my switch. Just verify that it is that, because I have it enabled on mine right now. And I really like the way I'm getting really good. Okay, it's just symmetric. So just like this, and then we hit apply. It's going to basically restart each of the ports, and it's not a bad idea to restart the switch at this point. But we've learned that it seems to be it gives better results if you do switch it over to flow control symmetric, and then we have 1500 as the set. And so that's a difference. That's actually a fundamental change in the NDI profile since NDI 5. But we've been doing some testing, and it seems to be better. So you do your own testing and you decide for yourself whether or not you're going to do that. But that's how you would do it if you wanted to turn that on and test. That's how that's done. Security, there's a couple of things here. This is more so for network administrators if you're setting this up with a Radius server. So I'm not going to get into that as of right now. Maintenance, you saw me update the firmware on this. And so what we did here is we clicked on the file and clicked upload, and then it sent that file here, and we select that one. This is the firmware. If you wanted to switch to a previous firmware version, you could hit apply and then hit this and then go to save, and it would reboot the switch and bring you on to the profile 2.19. So it's kind of nice. Like if you want to upgrade, but you're not sure if you like it, you can select this one, like select the other one, hit upload that one to that spot, and then switch between the two profiles and make sure it's going to work for you. So you can keep the previous profile and have a new profile. So that's super nice. If you're going to do this same configuration across multiple switches, you can also save everything and then click download configuration, and it will download this for local backup. But then I believe that you can, isolate it at first, upload that profile to a new switch, and then change the actual IP address that you're assigning that switch to, and duplicate that. So that's kind of nice. And of course, there's a big factory reset. If you just want to return everything back to factory levels, then there's that as well. AVB licenses, this is actually something that you would be purchasing from Netgear, so I'm not going to get into that too much. All right, and then the diagnostics tab. This is kind of a helpful little place that you can see some quick data. The one that I really like is the actual port stats, because this will tell us some stuff, especially when we're running a multicast, but this will tell us some stuff that's going on our network. And so you can clear the stats and start over and then watch the packets coming and going. The thing that you really want to see here is the dropped packets column. Because the drop packets column is going to tell you if there's an error with the device getting across the network or receiving, especially when we're talking about decode. It'll tell us if we've got a problem with a NIC card on the network. And as you see right now, this camera is not actually connected to anything, so it's not broadcasting anything, but we are currently functioning just fine. There don't appear to be any actual packets being dropped. And so it's helpful to have this column here in real time, and you just refresh this page to get updated stats. So we just hit refresh, and there you see more packets coming through because they're on and communicating with the network. So that's kind of helpful. And some of the stuff I actually, full disclosure, I haven't actually used. So like the cable test, you can actually select a port and test the cable that's plugged into it to see if it's working correctly. That's fun. You know what? While we're here, we might as well just check. Fault distance 5. So I'm not entirely sure what these results show, but if we say both of these, testing these, results are open and normal. So yeah, there may be actually a problem with that cable. Good to know. It's working with the studio all right, but be curious to swap it out and see if that makes a difference. But there are some helpful tools here inside the actual diagnostics. If you were to ever interact with Netgear, if you had an issue, and they, by the way, I need to say this, they, by the way, have a stellar support group, and they can be reached at proavdesign@netgear.com. So if you have problems with the switch, or you're experiencing things or anomalies or whatever, and the BirdDog device is working fine, but the switch seems to be having issues, hit them up at proavdesign@netgear.com, and those guys are aces. So they may ask you to send them this report, so download the log and send it to them. So you can do that right here on this screen, and that's super helpful. You can also turn on console logging, command logging, but do that at the discretion of Netgear tech support and not necessarily on a whim. So, okay. So that takes us now to kind of the conclusion of everything you need to know to get your switch up and running to work on NDI as we foresee it. And so my switch is up and running. There are two sets of lights on each of the front here. The first is a green light, and that's the actual network activity light. And then there's a blue light, that's the PoE. So it's super helpful to be able to just look at a glance. There are also LEDs on the NIC cards on the back. So there's a green and a blue one as well. So whichever way you mount this is totally easy to see. These ears that are on the side of the actual networking ears that are on, I guess you can't see that. There's a pair of networking, rack ears that are on the side of it. They can be flipped around and they can be put on the other side as well of the switch as well. So it can be mounted forwards or backwards depending on what your design is. And so they give you lights on both sides to show. Now, the other thing I'm going to show you is now I'm going to take my computer out of the OOB port, and that's going to dump this this website that we've been using. No longer plugged in at the 0.100 address. And I'm going to take this and plug this into port 10. So let's watch for a second. Okay, so I'm in port 10 now. And over here, can you see that on the screen? Yeah, over here you can see that there's network activity. Now, I got to go back and I got to clear my network card because I'm still sitting at 0.100. So we're going to go to Control Panel. And we're going to go to Network and Sharing Center. We're going to open this one. I know that this is the one that I'm using, so I'm just going to click on that one. And it opened on the second screen. So it's going to open this, Properties, IPv4. And I'm going to clear this and just hit OK, OK, and close. And now, identifying, boom, Network 6. Sometimes you get the, do you want to join the network thing? I did not this time. That's odd. But anyways, okay, so I have been given an IP address. Now, how do we check? Well, let's open command prompt and say it with me now. IP config. All right, so here, and we're looking for 85. So 85.13, so the DHCP on the switch worked just fine. I'm not taking up a PoE port. I'm in port 10, and so that is great. Now, how do we get back to the web UI now that we're inside? So 0.239 is not going to work anymore. But remember, we assigned this switch and IP address inside the VLAN, right? And that was 192.168.85.1. Oh, look, there's our web UI for this switch. And so the password is still the same as we had set it, or if you haven't set it, it's still the default. And we log in to our web UI. Now, be careful making changes on this side, because if you make IP changes on this side, it's going to affect your connection with your computer. So it's always best to set up the network stuff, all the profiles and everything, using the OOB port, because you'll never get disconnected from that one, regardless of what changes you make on the switch. But if we make changes to this VLAN, it's going to restart the VLAN, and that can cause intermittent problems. And so don't do that. Set up all your network profile stuff inside of the OOB port, and then switch over if you want to test it. So now we can see here, port number 10 has this little green outline. It's kind of hard to see. Sorry about that. There's no power. I don't know why they include that on port 9 and 10, because it's no way to give power. But anyways, there's no power. That's my IP address, 85.13. There's my MAC address for my computer. And my NIC card is made by Pegatron, apparently. So the link speed is a gig, which is what we expect, and I'm on VLAN 10. So fantastic. So now I could open up Studio Monitor inside of this computer that I'm plugged into and pull up the camera or pull up the studio and access it. Let's go ahead, though. We know what the IP addresses are. So 192.168 or 192.168.85.11. Look, there's my studio. And the other one should be 85.12, right? 85.12. Ah, there's the P100. Fantastic. So we know that these devices are here, and now we can get to them locally, move them around, configure them, plug in a keyboard, go to Studio Monitor, whatever you want to do. And we are good to go. Okay, that is the end of the basic setup. Let me jump over to the chat real quick and make sure that I haven't missed anything critical, or I haven't been muted this whole time, or something ridiculous like that. And then I will show you the DHCP reservation list. So not a whole lot in the chat, which is fine. What's going on, Warren? Good to see you. Thank you for jumping into the show. I'm going to jump back over here. It's good to see you, Warren. Thanks. Is there any documentation on the QoS, et cetera, for switches for BirdDog out there? So QoS in general should be turned off. There should not be any quality of service inspection going on at all on your NDI network, because it just slows things down and we can't then deliver one frame in code. So QoS needs to be turned off, and you'll notice that that's the way that it's configured on the Netgear switch. If you set up with an NDI profile like that, that will be done automatically for you. We just switched ours from quiet to cool, and you weren't joking. Those fans are loud. Yes, sir. They are designed to be in a cabinet, not anywhere near your production. So it's fine if you have, like I said, a headroom or something like that, and it's air conditioned in there. Sometimes those rooms, or most of the time, those rooms are climate controlled. And so, yeah, crank those Jessies up there and get them going, and they scream. But that CPU will drop in temperature, that's for sure. How about the Flex 4K for NDI 5? How about it? Do not set switch to act as DHCP if you are on the road and use venues network. Actually, we could talk about that. This design would be better if you were going to venues, because not only like what you want to eliminate there is being restricted or being at the mercy of the DHCP ability at your venue, right? So if you do it this way, you can have an isolated network, and the key is to have 2 network ports on your computer. And that computer can plug into that network and get an IP address and get internet and talk to the things out there. But then your NDI network is controlled and isolated, and it will perform the exact same way every venue you go to. And you won't be at the mercy of some Joe Schmo's Linksys DHCP crap router running in his closet that's up on the 20th floor. Yeah, there's philosophies on how to do it, but I strongly recommend you isolate your network like this, and then leave a couple of ports open if you want to connect to their network and get internet or something like that, or just connect the internet to the computer and then have this switch acting as your NDI backbone. That's what I would recommend, truthfully. Okay, so that is also one way to do it. Hey, man, I just wanted to say my firm is super happy with our bird dogs. Fantastic. That's great. We started with 1, and now we've ended up with 15 of them. Yeah, that's the danger, man. Those things multiply over time. But I'm thrilled to hear that. I'm really genuinely very happy to hear that you are enjoying them a lot, because yeah, BirdDog makes some great stuff, and if you get the network backbone working right too, then they will deliver some really cool stuff and change your workflow forever. I'll put it that way. You would assign the port you plug the venue into a different VLAN, probably VLAN 1. Boom! NetHab has it right. Yes, you could leave, for example, port 10 or any port, but if we're keeping it simple, you leave port 10 in VLAN 1, and you can plug that venue's network into that. You just need to then assign the DNS in your profile to whatever the default gateway is on that one. So there you go. I created a separate VLAN to take the venue's internet connection and DHCP on a non-PoE port. The camera and NDI NIC from the computer go onto the ports assigned to the NDI VLAN. There you go. That's exactly right. So yeah, you could leave 9 and 10 off, for example. In this instance, well, let's jump back here. Let me let's just talk theory here for a second. Okay, so back in this, you could leave 9 and 10 off of VLAN 10 in this instance, right? So that's my VLAN here, and leave them in VLAN 1, which is just the default data. And that VLAN will take in whatever a DHCP gives it. So the DHCP assigns it an address. Well, if there's internet on that network, now VLAN 1 on this network will have internet. So if we leave 9 and 10 off and we leave it in VLAN 1, now my NDI network operates in 1 through 8, and I would take and plug my computer into port 8 and take up a PoE port, but that's not the end of the world. And I could also plug my computer into port 8 and port 9. And so now I'm on VLAN 10 and VLAN 1. And I can get internet off of VLAN 1, and I can get I'm sorry, back this up. I plug my computer into 8 and 9. 8 would be on VLAN 10, which has my NDI network. In port 10 on my switch, I plug that into my venue. The venue on port 10 is going to issue my switch an IP address, right? But also make available port the network over VLAN 1 on this switch. And so now I can take my computer that's plugged into VLAN or VLAN 10 on port 8 and VLAN 1 over port 9, and I would get internet off of port 9 and NDI off of port 8. So that would be one way to do it for sure. And that way you show up to the venue every time, plug the venue into port 10, boom, you've got internet on port 9, and then plug my computer into port 8 and 9, and I'm up and running. It's a smart way to do it, and it keeps your cameras all on an isolated network where no one else can monkey with them. The other thing about it is that generally speaking, your cameras will get the same IP addresses if done this way. And the reason for that is because this switch will remember the MAC address that it saw in the past and will remember it for quite some time. And if the IP address is available for the MAC address that was there in the past, it will generally assign it the same IP address when it comes online now. So that's super convenient because these NDI networks don't have a lot of changing traffic on them generally. You plug in the same cameras to them most every day that you do a production. So it doesn't matter what port they plug into. If you plug that same MAC address, this camera or this studio, into this switch, it's going to say, oh, look, there's that same MAC address that I saw 3 days ago, and it had 192.168.85.11. And it will give it back to that one because that address has not been needed by anyone else. And remember, I've got over 200 addresses that which means 200 different devices can show up on my NDI network before it's going to regurgitate the IP address that it issued to the studio. So, yeah, pretty cool stuff, pretty sophisticated, pretty simple to use. Now, the thing that we're going to talk about before the day is out, geez, it's already 12:20 here. The thing we're going to talk about is, okay, but I still want to do DHCP reservation. It can be done. There's just a few aha and catches that we need to talk about. So we will do that in a hot second. Should the PC NIC card be configured for frame size flow control in the same manner as the Netgear port? Not for, so if you're doing the isolated thing like we just talked about, where you're plugging 2 NIC cards off the computer into this switch, one on one VLAN and one on the other, then no, because the NDI profile will already be set to 1500. Okay, so jumbo frames will already be turned off in this instance. And then when you're connecting to the network, the jumbo frames doesn't really matter if you're sending like this signal up to YouTube and you're using that just to broadcast your show. Don't worry about that. That's for vMix to worry about or for whoever, Wirecast or OBS or whatever. So you don't need to worry about frame sizes going to the internet for streaming your show, but you do need to be careful about frame sizes coming from and going to NDI sources. Okay, sources and destinations, you need to be careful with that. So anything that is an NDI source or destination needs to have frame size 1500. vMix. Yeah, I started using vMix. Remember that? That was the day that the world stopped turning. $2,000 budget. Would you choose a P200 camera or a P120 shooting high school basketball, baseball, and football? Is the budget for your NDI installation limited to $2,000? If it is, then I would maximize that budget by getting an appropriate switch first, an AV switch, and configuring it the way that we just showed it, and doing the 110 or 120. If you have $2,000 to buy a camera and you can get $700 more for a switch, then by all means the 200, because the 200 has a nicer Sony sensor in it, and it does blacks a little bit nicer, a little truer to form. Now, inside of a gymnasium or a arena, you're going to have really harsh lighting, and so that may not be a concern for you. And so, they're both great cameras. It's hard to say, but it's cheaper to replace the 120 if it gets broken. You are very welcome, Rev Radio. Thank you for stopping by. MTash, what's going on? I just finished teaching my 8 a.m. class and need a clarification for a question that I posed on the Facebook page. Oh boy. These ones are fun. Our school is not using 4K yet. I know that we will in the future, perhaps in 4 or 5 years. And I'm in need of another BirdDog Mini. Oh, you don't say. For encoding an HD 1080p signal from one of our cameras onto the NDI. The Mini now costs $100 more than a Flex 4K. Can I use, and should I just buy a Flex to convert 1080p to NDI? 100% you can use a Flex in to convert 1080p anything to, well, 1080p 60 or 30 or 2997 or 5994 to NDI. 100%. Yes, the Mini is more expensive. It does not have, it's because it's a massive heat sink, first of all, and it has a loop out. And so if the loop out is important to you, you need to get the Mini while you can. And the Flex is still, whatever, still out there. I know that there are more orders for Mini on the way. And so I don't know who has Minis, but they're a highly sought after product. So if you find one and you need one, you should definitely take that up, because the $100 gives you no fans. It's a heat sink. And the reason why I think it's $100 more still is there are no fans. And so it's an ambient cooled unit. It's built out of metal, whereas the Flex is a polymer plastic, and there are no moving parts in this thing. And so you know how moving parts go with technology. This is a heat sink. Now the Flex in, however, will do 4K signals, and then the Mini will not. The Mini will only do 1080. So if 1080 is the goal and you need the output, then you need the loop out, then the Mini is still great in that regard. But the Flex will definitely do 1080. But it is a different unit altogether in terms of it's not a heat sink. It's got fans to move the heat. And now it has like a nice little tally light on it and a few other things. So that's pretty cool. But yeah, there are some differences, and personally, the Mini is still a hot, sought-after product because, it's good. Plus Tally and Comms. So Tally and Comms is available on both of those products. The Tally is this little bar right here on the Mini. There's like, oh, you can't see that. There's like a little clear thing. So Tally is there, and Comms is integrated right there in the. Oh, I'm sorry, not that one. Right there. That's a headphone jack that can be used for comms. On the Flex, there is also a headphone jack and a big halo light, which is the Tally. So there's that option as well. Okay, now I know why the rest of you are hanging around, because you want to learn all you can about the 4250. And in this regard, we want to talk about setting static IP addresses in the DHCP reservation list. So let's get on back there. Now, the first thing that you need to do is you need to log into the main UI login. You may say, what is this? Well, this is what every Netgear network admin has looked at for the past 30 years, is this interface. It's not pretty like the other one is, but it gets the job done. The username and password are the same that you set for the previous, for the other interface. But the place that you do that, so you go to this web UI and then you click on main UI, and then it'll take you here. And in we go to the switch. Now, we've got our profile already set up, right? And so that's good. We need that set up in order to do this next part. So the profile is all good to go. Now we need to just double check a couple of things. The first thing we need to go is click on System and then click on Services. And here we need to make sure that admin mode is enabled. If it's not, you need to hit enable, hit apply, and let the thing reboot. Okay, so admin mode on DHCP server configuration needs to be enabled. Now we need to go to pool configurations. And here is where we are going to set up our static IP addresses for inside the DHCP reservation list. We need to find out, one of the first things we need to do is we need to find out what MAC addresses are on this guy. And so we're going to go to address table, and I'm going to look at ports 1 and 2. So here is port 1, okay? And here is port 2. Okay, so we need to remember these. So I'm just going to open like a notepad or something and copy these in. So let's control, whoops-a-daisy. So we need to remember these two MAC addresses. You can also find them on the devices. There's on stickers and stuff. They will show you what the MAC addresses are if you want to like verify this. But let's just open Notepad, and we're just gonna open Notepad and copy these in here so that we have them available, because this is how you marry those MAC addresses to IP addresses. So the way you find that is by clicking on switching and address table. Click on address table and look for ones that say the actual like the port number is 2 and 1, and they should say learned. Okay, so these have been issued, and the switch has learned. The actual routing address tables have learned what the MAC addresses are. Okay, so back to system, back to services, and DHCP pool configurations. Okay, and we have to do these individually and at the very end of our setup. So that's super important. We are not going to make changes to our network after we do DHCP reservations. Now, I've been told that this is changing, and I've been told DHCP reservations will be getting an integration with the user interface side that we were just in earlier, but this is how you currently do it. Now, you cannot change this. You cannot make changes on the other side of this switch after this is done, or these will all disappear. Okay, like you can't delete the profile, for example, or they'll all disappear and you have to do it all over again. So this should be the last thing you do in your network design if you want to assign IP addresses to specific devices. All right, so here we go. So we're going to create a new pool name, and the pool is actually we're going to allocate a license to a specific device, and so we're going to create a pool, and the pool is going to have one address in it. All right. And the pool name is going to be called Studio. Let's say Studio 1. That's fine. Looks like I've already tried this once. And we're going to say that we want to create a manual binding type. All right. Now, the client name should be whatever you want. In this case, we're going to call this Studio or DHCP client or whatever. And we're going to put the hardware address in here. Now, this is the 80 is the Studio one. So we're going to do that. And it's an Ethernet connection. All right, so we want to put in the MAC address of that. Now, under the client ID, we want to type in 01 and then the MAC address again. So it should look like this, okay? 01 and then the MAC address. So it should have the MAC address. It should also have that little semicolon in there. Then we want to say host number. This is the IP address that we want to elect for this device. So we're going to say 192.168.85. Now we're going to pick one that we haven't used yet, right? So let's say 21. So we know that that is, if my studio gets that device, we know that the reservation is working. So 85.21. The mask, of course, 22255. And then nothing needs to go in the prefix length. You can use this instead of the host number, but this is for pool creation and not for assigning IP addresses. So just leave that as is. Lease time, we can make this just 1 day, although this will probably never change, but 1 day is fine. And then that is it. That's the whole setup. We're going to say add. And now we have a studio pool. Now we're also going to change, and we're going to create another one that's called the P100, right? And we're going to do the exact same thing so you can see this done again. And remembered all of this. So now this is P100. Whoops, that's not P100. P100. We need to change this. Let's go back to our notepad. This is the P100, right? Address, Ethernet. We need to say 01, boom, like that. We're going to change this now to something like 22, 22255, duration 1 day, and we're going to say add. Okay, now this is done as far as I'm concerned. I always like to hit this little save button because you never know. Configuration has been saved. I don't know when that's required or not, but At least it's saved. Okay, so now we are going to go back to this view, first of all, and we're going to reboot my camera and my studio. So how do you reboot your camera and studio? Pull the power. Okay, so we're going to take the power out and then plug this back in. And up she goes. And startup has begun. And now we're going to reboot the camera as well. So she's going to do the dance. And let's make sure before we leave this screen that the switch is now issuing. It's the IP that we've specified. All right. Let's watch that studio, make sure that it goes. Boy, this is dramatic. 192.168.85.21. So we have confirmed that our DHCP reservation is now working. So I'm going to sign out of this web UI. And we're going to jump back now into the previous one. And how do we do that? Well, we have to wipe this and go back to this screen. Put in our super secret password. I'm sorry. And go back to our web UI here. So I logged out of that switch. I'm sorry I didn't show you that. Logged out of the switch. Went back to the IP address of my web UI. It refreshed the page. It took me to the login for this screen. And here we are. So now we're going to look at ports 1 and 2. And here now we have 85.22. That's the P100. And we have 85.21. That's my studio. So DHCP reservations. Now, I can't do anything now with this switch because I've been informed that if you change anything here, it wipes all of your reservations back there. So the reservation thing is the last thing that you can do. You can't make any more changes to this switch. So it needs to be done. Everything needs to be set on this side, and then you do the DHCP reservations. But that's how it's done. And you saw it here first, folks, how to actually do that. So I know people have been asking for that tutorial, and that, as of today, is how that's done. So we will, hopefully you find that useful. Remember, the women don't find you handsome. They should at least find you handy. All righty. Let's finish up here and go. We have been at this for an hour and a half, so cool stuff. Have you gone through Netgear Engage? No, we're going to do its own show because I just wanted to show how to do this for a one and done switch and make it available for people to use. So we did not talk about Netgear Engage. That is their switch management software, which I can show you that because I have multiple 4250s in this network at my office. I'll install that and then I can also maybe install that on this machine and then I can show you that kind of in live, the live overview as things work out. Does the Mini support NDI 5? I have not seen a firmware update. Correct. We do not have a firmware update for Mini yet. We are working on converters and we are working on Silicon 2 and we're working on a bunch of things. And so we are hoping to have more news on when that will come out. But NDI is current. NDI Mini, and Studio, and Flex, and 4K are currently all working in NDI 4. Now, I use those devices with the NDI 5 profile. They seem to work with the NDI 5 profile. So you may choose to quote me on that, but it appears that if you set up an NDI 5 profile on a Netgear switch and then you're using NDI 4 on your converters, you should be okay. And in particular, I'm using a BirdDog Play on that profile. But I am using that flow control option. So remember that. Whoops, not that screen. Man. Oh yeah, today is the last day that I'm going to have dueling mice and dueling keyboards. I got a switch coming, so pretty excited there. Have my own router to isolate my NDI network. Router also has 2.4G radios, so I can fail over from WAN to SIM1, and then ooh, that's cool. Yeah, that is cool. It's always nice to have a backup plan, right? Sorry, but I just wanted to clarify that some of the Facebook comments said to get a play, but wouldn't a play provide an unsuitable NDI signal for input into a switcher? Isn't the play just an output for simple video display? Correct. Play plays the NDI signal. That is the point. And so do not buy a play if you need to encode. Your choices are Flex In, Flex Backpack, 4K HDMI, or Mini or a Studio if you can find one. Those are your encoding converters from BirdDog offerings. But yes, do not buy a Play. That's a decoder. That's like buying a Flex Out. So again, one more time. Your options are Studio and Mini, Flex In, Flex Backpack, 4K HDMI. Those are your options. There's 5 of them out there, depending on what your budget is. Those will all encode NDI. Oh yeah, the Mini and Studio, by the way, can be flipped between encode and decode, which is, something that the Flex can't do. The Flex doesn't do in or out. There's a Flex in and there's a Flex out. Mini can be swapped from an encoder to a decoder, and so can Studio. So can the 4K HDMI. And so if you need that for multiple, like if you need it to be diverse, then that's also an option and a feature that Flex does not have. So there you go. Yeah, that's what I figured. Thanks. You are very, very welcome. All right, folks. Well, I have been yakking for for over an hour and 40 minutes, it looks like. So we probably should wrap this up. Hopefully you have found today's show informative and you have the questions that you generally need answered to get yourself up and running. If you follow my tutorial and you do as I have done on this show, you will definitely be off to the races when it comes to setting up your NDI network. There are some advanced configurations that we will cover in a future show, but as of right now, that should get you off and running if you have a single M4250, or if you're like an installer and that somebody wants to run an NDI network. Man, make your life easy, make their life easy, get a 4250 and make it happen, because those switches will definitely handle the DHCP side of things. They'll run in the preferred network configuration for NDI, and you'll save yourself and BirdDog support a lot of headache. So it's always about making sure the customer's happy, making sure the goal here is to be sure, if you're an installer, is to make sure that you get quickly to the place where you can submit the invoice, right? Like, we want to be able to, the customer to be thrilled with the install, everything just to work, for it to be straightforward for them, but also for you to get paid and move on to the next project. So the 4250 is your friend. They also make a smaller version of this that's like a desktop version, but I haven't given it a run for its money because they're very scarce. I haven't given it a chance to see how it performs, but I've heard it's worth looking into. So we will check that out and look at that one day when I get my hands on it. All right, folks. Well, as always, if you need help between now and Thursday at 11 o'clock Eastern time, please reach out to me or my team at help@birddog.tv. My buddy, Senseless, who is on this show every now and then, he has been sick for over a week and had a brutal go with, we think, COVID. But anyways, he's been at home. He's back online, though, and he's feeling a little better. And so our thoughts and prayers are with him as he recovers. But I'm excited because he's back in the desk, and he's an amazing agent. He does a great job. If you submit a ticket, he will likely at least see it, if not answer it. And so reach out to us at help@birddog.tv. But I got a team of guys here as well that are really quick to help and willing to help and want your network to work the best it possibly can. And so reach out to us and we will sort out what it is that needs to be done. The other thing is, if you have questions about products, you're welcome to send them to us at help, but the more efficient way would be to send them to hello@birddog.tv. This team is a giant group of pre-sales guys, and these guys know their stuff really well. And so I cannot speak highly enough about this group, because these guys are aces, and we've got somebody for every zone in the globe. And so if you're over in the APAC market, if you're over in Europe, if you're over in here in North America, South America, over in Australia, wherever you are, we got somebody that can work with you locally, at least very close to your time zone, if not in your time zone, and in some cases in your language. So feel free to reach out to hello@birddog.tv if you have questions about our products, but you haven't purchased anything yet. You just kind of want to know how it might work. These guys, you need to get in touch with them. They know their stuff. They're very, very knowledgeable, great group of guys. And yeah, just good people to know. So reach out to them if you have product questions as well, and they'd be happy to give you a hand. Of course, our show runs from Tuesday and Thursday from 11 to 12 and beyond. So feel free to join us a couple times a week. I'm here to answer your support questions. I'm here to be accessible and to show you tutorials and to demonstrate products and to answer your questions and eat your spicy food. We did do snacks on stream today, so we will do that on Thursday. But we just got talking about the beautiful 4250 and the geniuses over at Netgear. And so join us on Tuesdays and Thursdays from 11 to 12. You may be interested to follow the channel BirdDogJohn.tv. It's a YouTube channel. I'm doing what I can to like grow that audience. And whoever it was, like 10 of you subscribed over the weekend. Thank you very much. And that means a lot. We're trying to do something with that channel. We need to get a handle and we need to, kind of grow it a bit. And so join us over on the BirdDog YouTube page. That's where a lot of marketing stuff is and these videos as well. But the support group, me, BirdDog John, I am at BirdDogJohn.tv. That's where I send everything that I do online. Anytime I stream, it's going to be on that channel for sure. So hit me up there, subscribe to that channel. I would greatly appreciate that. That would be very, very helpful. Yeah, you do me a solid. And then however you get notifications on YouTube, I think that you can click the notification bell or whatever it is that you want to do. You can set that up and maybe you get emails when I go live or whatever. That's up to you, but that's an easy way to keep track. And then you don't have to make sure that you're following at the right time on social media and see the show. You can be notified however you'd like. So thank you very much, everybody. This has been a fun little show, and I've had I'm really excited about the 4250. I've had a lot of time to think about it and to try it out and to play with it. And I've done some sophisticated installs and actually manage the network in multiple ways. And so I'm really tempted to just make it more sophisticated next year. But anyway, we'll talk about that as NAB comes up next April, which is like going to be soon. It's the whole year is swinging by us like so fast. So it's almost November. Like next week is Halloween. And then we got to get into November. So the holiday season is around the corner. So yikes. So hang on to your butts, everybody. Transmission, thank you so much for coming by today. I really appreciate that. And hopefully you've had a good time here on the show. Kevin, likewise, my friend, have a great afternoon. It's been a pleasure to have you around once again. And for the rest of you that are out in the interwebs or watching this post-show, thanks for stopping by. Feel free to follow me over on BirdDogJohn.tv. That's my YouTube page. I'd really appreciate that. But in the meantime, join us on Thursday at 11 to 12 Eastern Time here in the U.S. And we would be lucky enough to have you join us on a live show. Bring your questions, bring your friends, anybody that's interested in NDI. And I would love to chat with them. So hopefully you're doing well. Take care of yourselves, and we will see you all in just a couple of days on Thursday. Cheers, guys. Bye.